So, okay, Miss Angela, tell me about your business. What do you do? How'd you get there?
Okay, so my husband and I moved to Atlanta about 10 years ago, and he worked from home, and I had kind of the ability to do whatever I wanted at the time. I had a strong desire to work for myself, and I wanted to be in the beauty industry. So at the time, permanent makeup was in a kind of renaissance. It was starting to become very popular again. And I took some training and I opened up a studio focusing on permanent makeup. I had the wherewithal to know that if I was one of the first people that opened up a studio here, that I would really have my foot in the door. And so I did. And it's been successful. It's just kind of catapulted me into entrepreneurship, which I always had a strong desire to work for myself. And yeah, I just
So
love
that
it.
was 10 years ago?
10 years
Your
ago.
studio is, and what's the name of your company?
Expressions Brow Studio.
Expressions Brow Studio. So it's been open for 10 years
It's been
now.
open for 10 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to hear from, from 10 years ago, the feeling, that's a big risk as an entrepreneur. You can go get a full-time job and have a guaranteed salary. And I don't think a lot of people understand the risk that we take to make no money or to sign a lease on a space and be committed. And what if people don't come in? I mean, how did that beginning story feel for you, that anxiousness? I mean,
Well, number one, I didn't have a plan B. So it had to work for me. And I think at the time when I first signed a lease, like you're mentioning, signed a lease, I actually did it with another female entrepreneur or budding entrepreneur. And I think we went into the venture with different ideas about entrepreneurship. She was doing it sort of as a side hustle, where for me it was my main thing. And so when we reached the end of our year lease, she kind of couldn't make it work, and I needed her. I needed her to give me the rest of the space because it was budding for me. It was becoming something very lucrative, and it was becoming a solid business for me. And so at that time, when we were deciding to whether or not to re-sign the lease together, I really needed all the time in this space and in the space for myself. So I think I didn't approach it with the plan B, so it kind of had to work for me.
you had to trust yourself.
I had to trust myself, yeah. And I think I started to see success maybe a few months in, where I know people, usually they're not successful the first year. They don't turn a profit. All that money is spent on building up the business. But for me, I could see that I was going to be profitable. So I took the leap of faith without a plan B. It's like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute.
Yes.
And you kind of have to land.
Yes.
And it just happened to work for me. So since then, I've expanded the business. I've hired people underneath me. I've opened a really big, beautiful studio that we just had redesigned. And I tell people, because I do training as well, and I tell girls who come at least into the beauty industry, if you're approaching this as a side hustle and it's not a passion for you, then that's not really a recipe for success. For me, I loved what I was doing. I was passionate about it. I wanted to be the best in my industry. And so I approached it that way. There was never an option for me to fail, as crazy as that sounds. It just wasn't an option.
No, I don't think it does sound crazy at all. And in all of the entrepreneurs that I have talked to, work with, and myself included, I call it running and jumping off of a cliff. So I just go run and jump and know that I'm going to figure my way out
On
of
the
it.
way down.
I'm just going to figure it out. I'm
Yeah.
going to have to trust myself. And I think that's a common trait in entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned, you started hiring employees. how did that, I mean, because you're in the beauty industry, that's what you were good at. And then you have to start learning about how to manage employees, how to do payroll, what you're supposed to do with taxes and leases and legal stuff. I mean, when all of that started to come in, how did you feel? Did you have guidance? Did you just...
I did have guidance. Once it started to become, because I am my business as well, right? So I'm the artist and the owner. I'm the main gem of my business. So when I started to hire people in and things got more complicated and I started to have to think of things on a larger scale, I hired out. I hired people to do the back work. I hired a CPA to do my taxes. I didn't want to be bothered with that kind of stuff, so I could concentrate on the business, really creating an experience for my clients, because I knew that was how I would grow. So I put all my efforts there, and then I hired in the background for the things that I needed outside of the scope of my particular business.
But even hiring, you have to create a job description, and then you have to go post it, and then you're doing the interviews, and you're doing reference calls. And so I do think that from the outsider looking in, often it's like, well, Angela, you're just so lucky. Everything seems to work out for you.
Did you ever see the picture where it says, everybody wants to be successful until they see what it actually takes? And they show a ballerina standing in her ballerina shoes, and one shows her foot really perfectly polished in the ballerina shoe, and the other shows her bruised up foot with the taped up and bruised and all kinds of scarring on her foot. And I think that speaks volumes to what we do, right?
That, yes.
People see success and they think, oh, that must be so easy. How lucky is she? This all fell into place for her. But they don't see the background, where how much hard work it actually took to get there. What you did, the sacrifices you made, the family sacrifices you make. If you're a mother and you're building up a business, you'll miss a lot of things. And I tell people this all the time. There is no secret to success. It's the work. It's the work. And there are things that have to be put on hold while you're building up the business, and you're creating work-life balance. You don't have work-life balance until you give it to yourself. You make it happen. And that only happens when you build up the business enough where you feel comfortable to take the time off, to be able to spend the time. And, it might not always be pretty, but that's actually the story of it. Something is gonna give while you're building up the business. For me, I was really lucky. My husband worked from home. He was able to, I never really had the problems with, childcare and things like that other women may have. So I was lucky in that capacity, and having somebody who was supportive and really had my back through it all. Yeah. Because I don't think I would have been able to be successful to that capacity without that,
Absolutely.
Because it really is a sacrifice.
It is, and you're right. So I felt like I missed out a lot on my children's lives when they were younger. But I had to pay my dues, and I had to have that vision of the future in mind, that I'm going to make this work.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna have that time, and now having that time, that freedom, and being involved in their lives and not continuing. I think that could be a mistake, is that some people will just continue with their head down and miss out on those special moments in the kid's life. So how many children do you have?
I have 2.
You have 2, okay.
It's definitely a sacrifice, and you do it for the greater good. You do it for the greater good, for the stability, and for what you can give your children that you can pass down to them. I didn't have that. My parents were very much working class. There were 7 siblings. I'm in the middle of 7.
Oh my goodness.
So my parents were working to provide. And so I think I came in with a really clear vision of that. I'm from a generation of what they call latchkey kids. What is it called? Mm-hmm. Where like we came home and my mom wasn't home. We kind of, you know, did our own thing for a while. And I think I came into entrepreneurship with a clear vision of what I wanted to create for my family and for them to have some financial stability later, you know, and to be able to pass down some generational wealth, things that I didn't have passed down to me, you know. But not that it's good or bad, it's just different.
It's who you are, yeah. But you're showing them a powerhouse woman.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know? This is what it's like to work hard,
yeah,
but to also then reap the rewards of having now some flexibility.
Absolutely.
And something that you call yours, an asset that you can sell.
Yeah.
So is there, if you could go back, is there anything that you would have done differently, or a big aha lesson that you learned? Like, oh gosh,
what was something that I may have done differently? Just a very vulnerable moment. I think I would have, when I started to achieve success coming from someone who wasn't used to that level of financial success, I think I would have saved a little more. You know, I think for someone coming from my background, it's easy to be like, oh, wow, this money is here. I'm going to spend it. I'm going to buy all the things that I wanted to buy. So I think I would have had more restraint in that regard early on. Would have been helpful. Yeah.
I love that. And I do know that you're not alone in that. So being a financial advisor for upwards of 20 years now, it's that trust that we have in ourselves is good and bad.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
We trust ourselves that we're going to go make that money back. So I want that new car.
Yes. Absolutely.
Oh my God.
So restraint in that regard would have been, you know, useful for me for sure.
And with your kids now, you know, looking back at how you grew up, and it sounded like from a humble family. How are there any financial guidance that you're trying to provide for them that maybe you didn't see, or trying to teach them about saving money?
Absolutely.
Or allowance,
or my husband and I do try to instill a sense of, because my kids are very much more privileged than I ever was growing up. And so we want them to respect money. But to be honest, my kids are not very, they're not very extravagant. They just don't ask for too much. And even my daughter, who's only 13, she always is like very considerate of what things cost. And I don't know if she just maybe overheard us talking over the years and just kind of picked up on it, but she'll always, you know, if something feels like it costs too much for her, or the cost benefit, she is very considerate of that, even at 13. And my son the same way. You know, this goes back to me growing up in very humble beginnings, is I would, before they would even ask, I would be buying them extravagant things, expensive clothing, things that, coming from a place of not having, I wanted. And I assumed that they wanted it too. But my kids just didn't really care about that kind of stuff. They weren't very wanting the newest Jordans or the newest anything. They just really weren't like that. And so I had to really evaluate, what is it that I'm trying to give them instead of giving them my quality time. And I had to stop myself from overcompensating for what I thought I was missing.
Yes.
And using, instead of, my kids are not asking for those things, but what they do want is my time. And so that was where the value was. So, you know, as far as what I'm teaching them as far as financial stability and things like that, it's not been an issue. but the quality time is what my bigger issue is.
I
So
love
spending that time with them and really taking a minute, you know, you probably know, I think the world knows this right now. We work so hard and then we go home and we're on our phone and we're building our business, and the social media aspect of it is very much a part of everyone's business these days. So I have to really take my time or be thoughtful about putting my phone down, talking to my children, making sure that they know me, that I know them, and that's where our quality time is really spent.
And that
So,
can be hard because we
yeah.
always have work that needs to be done.
Always.
It's never done.
Never.
So to
If you
put
run
the-
your own business, it's
put it
always something.
down,
Yeah.
Yes. So if you could give an aspiring new young woman entrepreneur some advice, what would it be if they were just starting from deciding, gosh, that sounds so risky, that's scary for me to go that way and start my own business, versus I could lock in this salary and just live a comfortable life over here? Do you have any advice that you would give?
Number one, I would say entrepreneurship isn't for everybody, right? It's not something that, I say this all the time. Again, I teach, so I tell people all the time, it's not for everyone. You have to really be comfortable knowing that you're giving up a 9 to 5 for a 24/7. I never stop working. The only benefit, not the only benefit, but one of the benefits is as much work as I put in, it all circles back to me,
Yep.
right? So I'm not working for someone where the harder I work, the person at the top reaps all those benefits. But it doesn't make it for everyone. So the one thing that I would say for someone who has an entrepreneurial spirit is don't give up, because that's the only difference between me and 1,000 other girls who started the business at the same time that I did. I kept going. I kept going even when it got hard, even when it was difficult, even when I was upset, even when, you know, I had to sacrifice time with my family. I didn't give up. And that's the only difference between me and the girl in the beginning of the story, that when I was ready to re-sign the lease, I needed her to go so I can have the full space to myself. It's the only difference.
I
It's
completely
just the work.
agree.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
So,
My last question for you is, as your success has grown, I mean, did you have maybe a core group of friends that you had from younger years, and you started to see that you were maybe growing in a different direction? You know, have you found it harder to find other women that get you, that get the struggles? Because it can be a very lonely place.
it can be. I would say not just friends, but also family. It's hard for people to see you in a light that they're not used to seeing you in, especially if it reflects back on them in a way that they don't prefer.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think it can be very lonely if you start achieving success and people don't want to see that in you, or they don't want to see that reflected back on them. And so recently we relocated the studio. This was a big deal for me because I was kind of working in my own studio, but off by my, on my own, in a more secluded place. So I had my employees and myself and my clients. But now we recently moved into a complex of many other beauty professionals and women that are at the top of their game. It was the best move I ever made.
Oh my God, that's
Being
fun.
surrounded by that is so inspiring. So every day I go to work, I see other women who are doing exactly what I'm doing and succeeding at it, and watching them and how they're approaching their business is always inspiring for me as well. So that was my biggest, I think, beneficial move that I've made in recent times.
Yeah.
But as far as maybe family and friends who didn't quite get the journey, not everybody can go with you,
Yeah.
right? And that's okay.
Yeah.
Not everybody is meant for every chapter of your journey. And so, yeah, you may leave some of that behind, and then you find other people who are on the same path as you, and it becomes sort of like a family. Yeah.
I love that.
So.
Yeah. That's where Boujee Boss Lady really stemmed from, was me finding myself in a lonely space, finding that I had amazing friends, amazing family, and it wasn't that I was going to break up with them or anything or not want them anymore. I just needed to complement them with some other people who got me.
Yeah, yeah.
That I could talk about, oh my gosh, I went through the and interviewed 15 people, or I had to let someone go, or that's hard stuff to talk about. So
Yeah.
well, thank you so much for being vulnerable,
Of course.
sharing this information, and joining the Boujee Boss Lady photo
Well,
shoot.
thank you for having me.
Yes.
I love it.